Okay, so I've been inspired a number of times just looking out in Tableau Public at some of the sort of non-production data visualizations and analyses, and this is one of my favorites. It's one of a lot of people's favorites. I think it does a good job at going through a quantitative analysis of a creative process that doesn't really do a nasty job at insulting the creative process itself, but instead sort of complements that beautiful process with a quantitative analysis. So this is a Beatles visualization that was put together by Mike Moore. Again, it's out on Tableau Public. It is, I believe, one of the all-time hits. So you can feel free to go out and check this out whenever you want. But let's just real quick dive into what this is. This is an analysis of the writing content of the Beatles discography. So the first thing you're probably drawn to is, first of all, the beauty and simplicity here. So this is a very well put together, very well spaced and formatted dashboard. But then the content itself is really beautiful as well. Bottom right, you see these 4 images. Again, very well selected images of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. When you hover over these or even click on them, you see different or various portions of this dashboard highlighted. So let's look at the top here. So this is the writing percentage by album. When you hover over John, it highlights John's role in writing of what I presume to be lyrics. In this case, all across the top here, you see Paul. When you go over Paul, likewise with George and Ringo. Ringo is not writing a lot of lyrics, but that's okay. Don Henley is probably the most well-known lyricist drummer, although I'm sure I'll hear from someone about how I'm wrong there. And then down here you just have writing percentage by artist over time. Very similar to what you see above, except you have the percentage of artists over time. So in 1963 they had Please Me, and they also released with the Beatles. You can see that John wrote about 60% of each of those. You can see that Paul wrote right around 40 for each. And then just in general, without highlighting any of the members, you can see that over time, as the Beatles became a much different band, you can see that the writing process became much more collaborative, with George holding a little bit of the weight, and even Ringo out here into the more collaborative phase or deeper phase of the Beatles. Great visualization. The way that this data is presented is really, really beautiful, and again, I think respectful of that creative process, while really lending itself to or really adding something to the understanding of the discography. It's a beautiful balance. This inspired me to go out and create a visualization or an analysis of something that I'm really passionate about. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the subject matter that I chose was perhaps a bit less culturally influential as the Beatles. I chose to do an analysis on Futurama. Futurama is an animated series that follows the lives of a set of individuals that works for a delivery company, only it's set thousands of years in the future in a, I'm not sure if I'd call it dystopian. I just call it fun future, imaginative future state of the United States, and yeah, it's a great set of characters. I find it to be really witty and funny, perhaps not coincidentally because I myself find science funny. Not everyone does, but I do. So I've put this analysis out on, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to show you a couple things real quick. The content for this was mostly sourced from the infosphere. This is a nice little wiki page set up by a number of individuals, I'm sure, and then also a lot of crowdsourcing. There's transcript information, where basically you have each of the episodes broken up by season. You have line by line for most of the seasons, and I'll show you some exceptions for that. You have the title, you have some metadata over here, the writers and who this was transcribed by. And then the meat of this, you have the lines, right? So you have a start time, and this is not all this data, not surprisingly, is present for all the transcriptions, but it's pretty well established that you have a line that has the character and then all of the words broken out by line for that character at that one line. So I was able to pull this data, extract this data out of the website, clean it up a little bit, and put it into a consumable fashion for Tableau. So in order to scrape this data, I use a tool called Mozenda. If you haven't used Mozenda or you haven't entertained using Mozenda, it is a great tool. I highly suggest you at least take a look at it. It puts writing your own web scrapers with Python to shame. Relatively inexpensive and can really give you a lot of bang for your buck for productivity. And then I do all of my actual preparation and cleansing with Alteryx. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go into that in this blog post, but in a forthcoming blog post, I will go through how I actually scraped and cleansed and combined data in order to come up with this end result. So we're going to start from the end here with the data visualization, and then go into the meat of how I prepared and cleansed the data. It should also be mentioned that I pull a couple of ratings from IMDb, just to give some credit where credit is due. Okay, so this is my Tableau public page. This is woohoo, the very first visualization that I've put out on public, hopefully to be followed by many more. The first thing that you'll see is I have a set of character PNGs up here. Each of these PNGs is interactive, so you can actually go out and click. If you hover, you can run out and see deeper information about Amy if you want to. But this is a subset of the many characters that have been featured in Futurama. These are dare I say, the main characters, but more realistically, the characters that work at Planet Express ship, namely Amy, Bender, Fry, Hermes, Leela, Nibbler doesn't really work there but lives there, Farnsworth, Scruffy the janitor, and Zoidberg. So the first thing that you see is it lets you know to select a character to analyze. So let's go ahead and select Amy, just because she's the first. And before we even do that, let's just look at this bump chart with everyone held in it. This is an analysis over seasons by character, so the different colors and icons indicate a specific character. So as you move up and down the y-axis, you see various characters, and as you move across the x-axis, you move across the seasons such that you have season 1 right here and season 7 out here to the right. Let's go ahead and highlight Amy. what bump charts do, just in general, is they give you a really good idea of how a given measure changes over time or fluctuates over time ordinally. So Amy in season 1 was ranked for the number of words that she spoke, the number of lines rather. She was ranked 5th in that season, dropped down to ranking 7 amongst all of the characters, and you can see her fluctuation as the seasons go through. This is a very helpful way, especially if you want to look at volatility. You've probably seen this with car sales, I believe, is one of the more frequent or classic examples of this. But it just gives you a really good idea of how your characters or how some sort of dimension ranks across time. So you can see Fry here was actually ranked 1st for the first 2 seasons, dropped down to 2nd for season 3 through 6, and then down ultimately to ranked 3rd for season 7. Season 7, unfortunately, was not completely transcribed. That's okay. We don't necessarily need all of the data. We just need a lot of it. The next graph you'll see is a stacked bar chart. So this is a way to see proportionally how much of my character's lines are, or how much of what portion of the overall lines spoken in a season do my character or the selected character account for. So remember, we still have Fry selected, so he's sitting over here. Fry was 31%, 26%, 25%, 23%, 21%, and 19%. So this gives you an idea, if you want to look season by season, what season do I want to focus on? It gives you a proportion of the overall lines for that season. What you'll also see here is that I've actually ordered this bar chart very similar to what you'll see here in the bump chart, such that the rank from top to bottom is the rank from first to last. I just liked that redundancy. I think that it flows well and gives integrity to and reinforces the bump chart up here, but I think that the bump chart is a much better way of representing those ordinal changes. But just know that those sort of ordinal placements between seasons are also represented in that stacked bar chart. One thing that I wanted to look at almost immediately, and that's how I basically started this analysis, was I wanted to know what episodes some of my favorite characters had the most sort of lines in. So you can see here again with Fry selected, The Luck of the Fryish, Cold Warriors, all the way down to Space Pilot 3000, which is the first episode, are the top 10 episodes that Fry speaks in. So he has 82 lines in The Luck of the Fryish, which is in season 3. Fistful of Dollars, season 1, 73 lines. Just gives you an idea, especially if you want to focus on one specific character, which episodes to watch. Another thing that I wanted to look at was relationships. So relationships between characters. So Fry and Leela have a romantic relationship. Nibbler and Leela have a pet to master relationship, such that Leela is the master to Nibbler, although it's sort of in question once you actually learn a little bit about Nibbler. And then Amy has a relationship with another character not actually part of Planet Express ship, but on Zap Brannigan's army. So I was, interested in, well, let's look at Fry here. I wonder if, granted all the lines that Fry has, if that line includes another one of these characters, who is that character? So if one character mentioned another, of whom did they speak? Not surprisingly, Fry said Leela's name the most. Sorry for this bunching here. If anyone has any suggestions about how to actually push the bar or the label out, I'd love to hear it. It's another beautiful part of the public experiences. I'm sure someone has some sort of trick to make this better, so I'm looking forward to hearing it. And Bender and Fry are best friends. But also Bender is spoken to or of a lot in Futurama. So remember, Fry and Leela have a relationship. Let's check to see if Leela says Fry a lot. Turns out she does. Turns out she does almost twice as much as she does anyone else in the cast, which is cool, right? That's a 10,000-foot understanding. This would maybe be a jumping off point for a sentiment analysis of the love relationships in Futurama. Who else? Let's look at Amy. Amy, again, like I mentioned, has a relationship with Kif, and looks like Kif is number 2. Kif also, didn't really make it into the seasons, and this was a later development. So I presume that if Kif were to be around for longer, he would have displaced Bender at some point. Nibbler really actually probably doesn't say people's names a whole heck of a lot. In fact, he doesn't say more than 5 people's names. So he actually says Fry a whole heck of a lot, and one of the reasons that he actually says Fry a whole heck of a lot is if you look at the episodes, the top 10 episodes for him, Why of the Fry is a very Fry-specific episode where Nibbler speaks to Fry a lot, and specifically, I would say probably the count of 14 lines here. Almost all of them have Fry's name in them, in the day the Earth stood stupid, because in that episode, Nibbler can only communicate with Fry due to the existence of a specific brainwave that's knocking everyone else out except for Nibbler and Fry. Okay, let's go back to Bender. This is a very interesting one. Not surprising, Bender basically rules the roost for almost the entire catalog in terms of the number of lines spoken and the proportion of lines spoken. Bender speaks of himself almost twice as much as he says anyone else's name, which, if you get to know Bender, makes a lot of sense because he's a very self-centered robot who really thinks first of himself, and then, if at all, thinks of others. So it's a very interesting and pretty funny proof of a hypothesis, I suppose. The next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the other words that these characters say. These characters have a lot of catchphrases. So Dr. Farnsworth says, "Good news, everybody," quite frequently. Let's see if any of those news and good, not surprising there. He speaks about time a whole heck of a lot. It's just funny to see, some of those catchphrases represented here. Bender, what does Bender say a lot of? Yeah, right is, spot on, like 100%. Singing is interesting. I'm not sure when he said that a lot, but I'm sure there's one reason or another that he said singing a lot. And then robot. Interesting, just because none of these other individuals said robot at all. Who probably has the most other lines? Fry. I don't see robot anywhere else in anyone else's verbiage analysis. Anywho, starts to give you a really interesting view of these characters, and really actually gives you probably a a great next step to the next 7 questions. Zoidberg has a claw. He says hooray a lot. Also makes a very distinctive sound. So I presume that shouting is actually what they use to represent the sound that he makes. So very interesting analysis, added a lot to what I thought I knew about Futurama in terms of content. But then the next thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to take a look at the actual ratings of this show, and I wanted to say, okay, well, do the writers have anything to do with higher ratings? So is there any one writer or set of writers that have higher ratings than others? What about seasons? Is there any seasons that are ranked higher than others? And then also, sometimes this was aired on Sunday, and other days this was aired on Thursday. As well as this was also for a period of time on Fox and then switched later in the seasons over to Comedy Central. So I wanted to see if that had any real effect. On the left here, you'll see the rank of writers. So it looks like Lewis is actually doing the best with an average rating of 8.22, which is actually pretty good just because he wrote 10 of these. And you'll see some of these other authors didn't write that many. So David Cohen wrote a lot as well, and 7.958 is not far off of 8.22. So you could maybe argue that David had a higher success rate, or maybe a better weighted average. I don't know how you want to look at this. Michael Rowe, not doing so hot. That's okay. Unfortunately, he got stuck writing some of Season 5. Little known fact, Season 5, if you're not a Futurama fan, Season 5 was actually 4 separate hour and a half long films that were written between when the show was canceled on Fox and when it was picked back up by Comedy Central. And what Comedy Central decided to do was, instead of start writing new content immediately, they actually split these out over 4 different episodes. So Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. Not exactly the best idea. Season 5 was not doing so hot. In fact, it was the lowest ranked out of all of the seasons. So anyhow, you can see your writers here. This is ranked and color-coded by the rating of the average rating of these episodes written by the authors. And then we have the season, again, an average. 8.26 for Season 1. Season 4, that last season on Comedy Central, 8.25. So it's possible that, the 8.25 and 8.26 have something to do with the first and last seasons on Comedy Central. On Fox. Fox also had a higher rating, but they also had a lot more episodes. That I analyzed. Remember, Season 7 was not fully transcribed, so I bet if I was able to analyze all of Season 7, they're much closer in the number of actual episodes, so it's possible that this could even out a little bit. And then on Sunday, the number of episodes, there was 80 of them, but seems to be doing a little bit, or at least marginally better, than when it was aired on Thursday. I believe this was aired on Thursday when this was on Comedy Central, so perhaps not coincidental that these two are lower. But again, no statistical analyses here. These are all just descriptive statistics. If you wanted some real meat behind this, of course, you'd have to go back and put in some deeper analytics, and that's maybe the next pass at this, And then down here, just a quick lollipop to point out some of the higher rated of the episodes. The Jurassic Park, I believe, is the highest rated followed by Luck of the Fryish. In the late Philip J. Fry. But something that's interesting here, is when you look at this, some of these higher rated episodes are really, really character specific. So the Why of the Fry, the Farnsworth paradox, the late Philip J. Fry. So maybe this is something that an executive producer is going to go back and say, hey, listen, those vertically based deep dives into characters, those episodes seem to be performing really well. Let's focus our writing around that. That's sort of the translatable portion of this to the real world. Not that being able to analyze this content back here is not relevant. This is extremely relevant, and there are principles here that can translate immediately over into some more serious production level analyses. But this dashboard, I would argue, is almost principally the exact same as anyone that's generating any content, any product, would like to know how each of the product processes are stacking up. So being able to know, well, is network affecting how my product is looking or being accepted? How about when I actually show this? These are not foreign concepts to a marketing director or an executive producer. These are very real numbers. So this second analysis that's really about ratings, I think, is a little more translatable to a production environment, but also maybe teeters a little bit far into taking some fun out of Futurama, or taking some fun out of this. That said, I had a blast doing this. I was scared that this would take a little bit away from Futurama for me, sort of the way that if you set your alarm to your favorite song, you end up hating that song. But actually quite the opposite happened for me. In doing this analysis, I think I really began to, I would say, respect and understand the amount of effort it takes to go into writing an entire comedy series, or any series for that matter. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what I didn't know. I really encourage you all to play around with some non-production data. It's going to give that passion. It's going to allow you to explore a lot of methods and techniques with Tableau, Alteryx, or any analytics tool, and just your thought process in general. That passion is really going to help you or speed up that learning those principles. So I hope this was really helpful. I hope you enjoyed this. Go out, check out some Futurama. If you don't like Futurama, of course you can always watch The Simpsons, or heaven forbid, Friends or something like that. Thanks for watching, and hope to hear back from you.